Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 14 of the VID21 conference. My name is Julia Still, the creator and host. It feels like I was only here about 12 hours ago, because I was. We had a late finish last night with the wonderful Corinne Armour and talking all about fearless leadership, which is a lovely segue to our first session this morning with the wonderful Fabian Dattner. Fabian is the CEO of Dattner Group, a collection of businesses who are committed to changing the narrative of leadership for the greater good. She's one of Australia's most recognised leadership experts and has twice voted one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence and a Silver Award winner of the International Stevie Awards for Women Helping Women in Business. Fabian has given 2 TED Talks and is the author of 4 books on leadership. She is also the co-founder and CEO of Homeward Bound, a global initiative that equips women with a background in science with the skills to influence decision-making and policy-making as it informs the future of the planet. A documentary about the initiative is currently screening in Australia through streaming service StopPlay after its release into cinema last year. Fabian, I've been looking forward to this session all conference, to be honest. I think the more we talk about the future in the context of the legacy we leave behind, the better off the world will be. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure, and congratulations, Julia, on what is clearly a fairly epic effort on your part. And I understand that we're about halfway through. So I'm not quite sure how many people are online this morning. It's an early start, but I know other people will pick this up. A bit of background, just to put into context, and if people are coming online, I'd ask if you can turn your cameras on, but a bit of a background for me. I've 35 years, I've been leading organisations and also studying the practice of leadership. And for quite a long time, helping many other people develop leadership capability, not in a hierarchical form, but in terms of wherever you find yourself, your capacity to have influence wherever you find yourself. And in that context, I'm going to share some insights about what I think is necessary if we want to be legacy-minded in our leadership, and can we hold the big picture as well as being adaptable, given what's likely to happen. And I think for me, it's really important that we're not falsely optimistic, and we're not falsely, as they say in English, a Pollyanna, someone who doesn't face the facts and always sees exceptionally good news. There are very critical conditions in our world today that if we are to have influence, if we are to be genuine change makers, if we are to move forward and shape the world we want, not inherit the world we fear, then we have to be courageous about the facts. I'm going to show you a little video, which is from one part of what I do, and it'll give you a small taste of the position I take in our world today.
There are many things that concern people nowadays about what is happening to the planet. At some level, whether it's climate crisis or poverty, education or gender, biodiversity loss or the warming of our oceans, somewhere along the line we have to say, what kind of leadership got us to where we are today? And if we can understand that, ask ourselves, what kind of leadership will move us into tomorrow? Mother Nature really does need her daughters. More of us standing up to be collaborative, inclusive, legacy-minded. Homeward Bound was founded to create a global network of women with a STEM background willing and able to lead and solve our planet's greatest challenges. Right now, we're incredibly proud to welcome our 6th cohort, joining a global collaboration of 500 women strong, all chosen because they have the credentials and, most importantly, the will to work together to a more inclusive, legacy-minded world. The global COVID pandemic has given all of us pause to rethink what leadership at its best looks like. People have risen up, men and women, recognising the urgency of the crisis, working together, listening carefully to the people and how to enable swift, agile responses. These things will stand beside us as we move forward into what may be one of the hardest decades of the human experience. While the pandemic has given the opportunity for some of the best leadership practices to rise to the top, it has also created immense division through some of the worst practices. Greed and self-aggrandizement replaced collaboration and a care for the legacy we leave. That choice is no longer ahead for our species. If we continue down that path, it is an end of days game. Homeward Bound has an alternative. Homeward Bound focuses on building the skills of leadership, not just for individuals, but for the collective of the women of Homeward Bound. Personal, deep-level self-awareness, asking not who am I, but what am I like as a leader? What is it like for people on the other side of my choices? It is our time to redefine the rules of leadership, to ask not what we've been, but who we will become. Make personal choices that aid the collective and enable us all to leave a world that is materially more stable than when we came into it. Mother Nature needs her sons and her daughters. But the truth is, her sons are already largely in place. It's time now for the women to stand up, to value who they are and what they do, not to defend the men they love from loss of position, but to celebrate the women they are and to take up their leadership roles, both individually and together in our world. This is what we focus on in Homeward Bound. This is what we celebrate.
So that is one part of what I do. And in this context, I'll share with you what I think will best position us to be agile and adaptable in the year we're going into. Now, how I would like to start, but this will depend on how many people are online. Given I know that many of you are listening in to all of the speakers, and you're about halfway through, I'd be very interested to know what are the sort of questions that are emerging for you? Where are you finding yourself worried or stuck or concerned? And are you able to let me know? Because the more I know about you, the more I can give you something that I hope you walk away with that's really pragmatically useful. And I'll turn to Julia to help me get a sense of what those things might be.
So some of the thanks, Fabian. Some of the things that we've seen so far, certainly a lot of the questions have been, you know, last year was such a big year for very obvious reasons, and there's so much potential opportunity, but everyone's very tired. That's a common theme. So how can we move forward in a way that isn't, you know, taking more on, like in terms of weight, but in a positive way? Tamara's been to some sessions as well. So Tamara, if you want to chip in as well, feel free. Some of the other common themes are that we've had some really great conversations on things like sustainability. Purpose has been quite a common theme. So why are we working so hard, but why are we working? What's the difference we want to make in the future? That's been a common theme. And I'd also say, looking through all my notes, another common theme is how do we do it how do we become more inclusive? And I don't just mean in the numerical sense.
Yes, really.
I mean, you understand where I'm coming from, but
yes, I do.
how do we get the right voices, or all of the voices around the tables, the right tables, to have those conversations?
Okay, so the first thing I'll start by saying is this is not easy. This is, if you think this is a trip through a field of daisies, you'd be horribly wrong. I think this will be a very hard challenge for all of us, and it requires us to stand shoulder to shoulder. And why purpose is emerging is so crucially important is because we know that purpose is a measure of wellness. When you're doing something that you feel is worthwhile, you're likely to have more energy and more commitment. However, purpose alone is absolutely not enough, because what can happen in a very purposeful environment, you overwork, you overcommit. So I'll start with a proposition about well-being. It is said that the conditions for life exist for a maximum of 30% of the life cycle of a universe. So we are a very finite resource. We have a marker on the lifespan we will individually lead. And if we assume that the average age of predominantly the women, which is very predictable in this initiative, listening in and learning, and we take the likely lifespan of men and women averaged, then at best you're going to live into, the next generation will live into their early 90s, and some of the healthy ones will live in till you're about 108. And on that basis, 70 years from now, absolutely everyone, all of us, Tamir, Julia, Em and myself will be dead. And if we're not dead, all our relatives will want us to be dead, because we won't be a pretty sight. So the issue is, don't compromise the whole of your life for cause, and bring cause into all of life. So you have to work well, you have to live well. And living well, the whole of you, is about the fundamentals of love, of being in authentic, credible relationships with people, and having the time to nurture those, your friends, your family, and indeed your work family. If you're cause related, what can happen to people who drive a cause is they do it on their own. And if they do it on their own, they will burn out. Often why they do it on their own is because no one fully understands what I'm doing. So I would say to a leader who says that, you must understand yourself first, not the cause, but yourself. What are you afraid of when you're collaborating with other people? What part of you don't you know? What part of you is more when you're on your own and less when you're with other people? Because if you burn with a cause, then the people you develop a cause with are what will enable that cause, not your individual genius. So to Julia, I would say, my love, it is not enough to say I'm known for doing big things. A better thing to say is I'm known to work with an amazing group of people who together do amazing things. And the more resource you have in terms of friendship, shared purpose, in authentic relationships that are inherently loving and kind, the more enjoyable life is, and the more you're enabled in the work that you do. In pursuing a change, in dealing with critical events, we often drop individual well-being. And well-being isn't just psychological, physical, or diet, you know, your exercise diet, and whether you're looking after yourself spiritually and mentally. It is more than that. It is the ability to understand where your energy comes from. It's about what we call balance and boundaries. Now, I'm not saying balance as something when you're on a tightrope. It is the ability to thoughtfully address the things that you want and need, and to understand, if you don't look at that across three big domains, self, relationships, work, if you don't ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is important to me in this context? What are my aspirations and what are my priorities? What will happen is unconscious trade-offs will emerge. And unconscious trade-offs are when you create something amazing, but you stop exercising, or you exercise obsessively, but don't relax, or you relax and have great relationships, but you don't fuel your knowledge bank, or you are, like many people, deeply committed to knowledge and learning, but you're not exercising. Or for those of you in relationships, let me be entirely frank, you've stopped making love. You've stopped loving the person you live with. So the important thing is to understand your life is your life. And if you want to be influential, you must care for your life, all of your life, yourself, your relationships, and your work. So what do we notice about men and women? Is there a difference? I can't tell you whether it's bred in the bone or it's nurtured, but I will tell you what we see. And the work I do is global. A very big part of what the Dattner Group do is leadership development from executive teams, middle management, frontline. We have a division called Compass, which is all about working with and helping women to be more courageous together, to find courage, not confidence. Not a fan of confidence. Confidence for me often relates to what I call terminal certainty. I can be confident that I can type at a certain speed. I can be confident that I know how to cook a particular dish. I can be confident that as an engineer, I understand the specifications for a particular type of dam construction. But as a leader, confidence can sometimes be your enemy. Leaders have to be brave, and they also have to be vulnerable. They have to be open, and they also have to be decisive. So a lot of the work we do, particularly with women, is about building courage together. That's a huge shift on what leadership has been about. We have pursued individual achievement. We have celebrated individual achievement. We've promoted high-achieving individuals. And frankly, it's created the world we've got. And that world is full of interesting, inspiring, exciting, wonderful things. Human beings, on average, have improved life expectancy. We don't die in childbirth. Most serious diseases have been eradicated. Education's more openly available. Technology is available. But the planetary systems on which we survive are collapsing. Everything that is happening now was predicted 30 years ago. The fires, coronavirus and subsequent virus infections, and floods. And whilst they 20, 30 years ago might have happened occasionally, they're going to happen progressively more and more and more, and big storms. And they're going to happen concurrently because the systems in which we live are collapsing. So what do we do about it? We become brave. We become collaborative. We become honest about ourselves. We get off our hierarchy. We stop creating things on our own, and we co-create with people who own an idea as their own. Now, as a social entrepreneur, having created many initiatives in my lifetime and being the original visionary, literally dreamer of Homeward Bound, which is now 800 strong globally with 56 nationalities and 46 sciences, I can tell you the last 6 years have been the hardest of my life. And if you're 30 years old now, I promise you the best is ahead. So what you can get excited about is your influence in a troubled world. And to do that, you have to have resilience and energy. To have resilience and energy, you have to look after yourself, your relationships, and where and why and how you work. So I'm going to turn back to you, Julia, for another question that is relevant to this audience that I haven't covered.
Sorry, Fabian, you cut out at just the wrong time then. What was the question?
I was just putting to you another theme that I haven't covered that will be relevant to the audience.
Oh, okay. So Tamara actually said She's enjoying the conversations on leadership on many levels. She's stuck on sharing her thought leadership personally.
Okay, Tamar, this is just for you. Thought leadership is a great idea. It is, in reality, if I have to be really honest, it is marketing on steroids. So it's about increasing your visibility to a message that you burns within. And it is a brilliant process to help individuals synthesize an idea they have that they want to take to the world. I have deep respect for the methodology, but it is just the start. If you want something to work, you have to now remember that you don't get onto a speaking circuit just because you have ideas. You don't get onto creating an outcome just because you dreamt of an idea. You've got to come together with other people who connect to that idea. Because I know, having worked with thousands of leaders over my career, that you only have part of the skill you need to do what you want to do. Where are you lacking in that skill? What don't you know? What are you not good at? Where are you psychologically diminished by somebody else's behavior? What do you know you would love to be able to do better or more effectively? Go find someone who does that thing and come together, and you craft the idea together. And then you get two more people. So this is how it works. It's about your circle of influence versus your circle of concern. And it's an oldie but a goodie. It goes like this. In October the 15th, 2015, I have a dream. I'm in bed with my husband. My dream is I can see the bow of a ship and I can see that we are going to Antarctica. I see the women in front of me. I see their faces. I know what they are. I know they're women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, medicine. And I know what we're doing. I'm helping them to build leadership capability. We're connecting them to strategy as it informs how we do things. We're connecting them to science as it informs what's happening to the planet. And we're saying collectively, we must have impact. I wake up from the dream to my beautiful husband, who's a bonsai master and a philosopher, and I tell him the dream. And he says, that's an amazing dream, my love. What are we having for breakfast? That morning, I rang Dr. Jess Melbourne Thomas, a marine biologist, and I told her the dream. And I asked her, Jess, do you think this has got legs? And Jess, who was 31, a go-getter, can-do, Rhodes Scholar, amazing young woman who'd done our National Compass program for women, said, I love the idea. Why don't you try writing it down? And Tamara, at exactly that moment, the crazy me became plausible for the first follower. And if you've never seen The Dancing Man on YouTube, go and look it up. The first follower makes the crazy credible. No one follows the first at the edge of the bell curve. They follow the next 15%, and that 15% make the idea safe for the next 60%. So what happened for me is Jess put two more scientists in. And I remember sitting outside the offices of the Australian Antarctic Division on a wooden bench seat, having discussed the idea, having written my dream down on 10 pages, having gone through a whole range of people putting in comments. We came together, we discussed it, and I said this simple question: can we do this? And we all looked at each other, 4 incredible women, and we said, let's give it a shot. And we shook hands. And at that moment, we divided responsibilities. I certainly had the experience of organising leadership initiatives. I have a huge network of credible authorities in the field, lots of business connections, lots of organisational connections. The other 3 had a national organisation they had just launched that was going global for women in Antarctic and Arctic science. 2 of them had been to Antarctica multiple times. So we divided resources out. A month later, we had an expression of interest. I worked out what the cost would be to take 40 women to Antarctica. And we had a lot of people saying the idea was a great idea. At that point, Homeward Bound was born. And what happened from that point on, a faculty of 10 came together for 2 years, worked our asses off to deliver the first voyage. The first voyage was both brilliant. It was the largest group of women ever taken to Antarctica, all scientists. And I think for the first time, my dream met the reality. Oh man, did I have some serious feedback? And so I needed to change. I needed to do things differently. So did the team. So we spent the next 6 months pulling the whole thing to pieces and redesigning it. And then we took a deep breath and we did it again in 2017. But this time we take 100 women, and it worked well, but not well enough. So we got the 100 women to review everything we did. And now we've got a new faculty, 10 of the original plus another 10. And we all come together with all the feedback from the participants, and we don't defend anything. We change everything to accommodate the feedback we're getting on what we're doing. That's how you will build momentum. You do it on your own, you will always do it on your own. And I don't think that's healthy for you. And I don't think it takes great ideas and multiplies them.
It's been a common theme, and Tamo's touched on it in the chat, but particularly around the trend of women looking at last year and realizing that maybe where they'd been on the fence before, having the job, looking after the kids, that last year was a catalyst for some to change what they do, or to find a purpose greater than, or to find a new or better or a different purpose.
I think you've got to say a purpose greater than themselves.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And one of those areas is social entrepreneurship. And when you look back through your journey, what was the catalyst that made your entrepreneurship social entrepreneurship as opposed to just running any business?
Well, I think I have always been driven by the notion that I'm here for good fortune, to give and help people advance what's happening with the planet. My life, I could spend quite a bit of time talking about my family of origin and my relationship with my mum and dad. My father in particular was 6'5" and a very big character in my life, a beautifully spoken English man who came with his beautifully spoken English wife to Australia, both very much part of the artistic creative set. And at that time, good old Melbourne, Australia was very white gloves and flowers in the hat. And in my family of origin, I had 2 older brothers, and I would say that my older brothers were expected to be many things. And the fact that they weren't the things that my father particularly expected made life very, very hard for them. I, on the other hand, was the 3rd child and the daughter that they both wanted, and I got the best of them. And so I never felt less of a person in my relationship with them. I always felt who I could be and what I could do was open. But I loved my brothers, and I saw that their relationship, particularly with their father, was not like mine. And so at a very early age, it felt unfair. I felt that I was being treated differently, and I became an observer of my own parents. And I remember at 18, a critical turning point, watching my father speak to my second brother, he and I are very close. And I finally said to my father, stop talking to him like that. Why are you talking to him like that? Can't you see what you're doing? And so began my journey, frankly, of exploring, understanding myself deeply. I now have, our organisation has over 60 different diagnostics. We're diagnostic specialists about how human beings do life, from a deep understanding of how values are articulated and defined, not just because they're superficially interesting, but what are values? How are they formed? What is the difference between system values and personal values? How do you elicit those values so people understand how their behaviour is attached to what's important and how it can be triggered? How can we help you understand the danger and internal burn of perfectionism, competitive behaviour, and the need to control. And how can we help you understand, stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. You don't have to fit in to other people's expectations. You don't have to follow the rules all the time. Why are you always worrying whether you're good enough? And we help people explore this really tortured internal critic who can sometimes talk to us inside in a way we would never talk to another human being. So I have spent since my very early 20s a massive amount of my time exploring that. And then increasingly looking at the practice of leadership and realizing we have not got great leaders in our world today. What we've got is technicians, we've got salespeople, we've got accountants, we've got lawyers, we've got engineers who've been promoted because of specific skill, but they're not actually particularly good leaders. And so there is a crisis in the practice of leadership. So I now come to working with women saying, we need you in massive numbers. We need women leading because, and this is the awful part of women being hurt, is that for all the hurt women endure, and most women have experienced some form of abuse in their life, for all the hurt that women endure, they're our best bet on a sustainable future at the moment because they've got the skills our world sorely needs. So you have to be self-aware. You have to commit to your own education. You're not born knowing everything, and the day you stop learning about yourself and the impact you have on other people is the day your idea will stop coming to fruition. So if you're a social entrepreneur, if you care about people and your mark on the world, know yourself, know how other people respond to you, and act for the greater good. Always three contexts: self, others, context. And all three must operate in your head concurrently.
For people that have joined while Fabian's been talking, she's opened the floor to insights and questions from VID, and particularly as we talk about the future and where we might be going. How do we do that? And watched a very inspiring video at the beginning. Really encourage you to go back and watch that in the recording. So Vanessa, Jill, if there's anything you would like to ask, particularly in relation to where you are, what you would like to do next, feel free to either unmute yourself or ask the questions in the chat. One of the conversations that one of my favorite conversations so far has been with Yasmin Poole, who's a youth advocate. And before the session, you asked, what's the demographic of people at VID this year? And majority of the people are what I would say mid to late career, not exclusively, but most. What do you think what can we do to sort of start to nurture and encourage those people in, so that, let's face it, I mean, the baton has to be passed to someone, right? As you so eloquently put, we're all going to be dead soon.
Well, I've got a radical view on that, and it might make people feel uncomfortable. The first thing we can do is not be ageist, either young or old. We were meant to operate together, not in sections of the community. There's no passing of a baton because there's no baton to pass. That presumes it presumes that an individual can take something and do something. We need each other. We absolutely need each other, all ages. And so here we live in a time where the first time in human history, if you're 25 years, say we'll take you 13 to 25, the chances are you know more about how the world operates than anyone who's 45 and over. Now, you don't know philosophy, you might not know culture, leadership, preferences, you might not know business, economics, you might not yet have qualifications, but you understand technology and it's bred in the bone. There's that sort of comedic moment when you're with your parents and they say, I can't get a global remote to work. And a 22-year-old goes, oh, for God's sake, give it to me, beep, 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 and it's working. That is a problem for all of us. So we have to respect that there's a body of expertise in young people that older people don't have. We have this as a mandate in our programs now: a third of that age, a third are mid, and a third are much older. because we find people in their 70s and 80s have a calmness, have a wisdom. They bring love into the circle. They say, it's okay. Everybody stop. Now, what's the problem? And the baking of a cake, the sharing of a meal is part of staying whole and well. If they sit back in the chair and say, tell me what's worrying you, we need that calmness, that wisdom. We also need to be able to tip into their expertise. If you've been doing something for 50, 60 years, there's a wealth of knowledge that can be shared. By the same token, don't presume to tell people who are 23, 18 or 25 how to do life. Listen instead about how they would choose to help all of us. And if you're in the middle, start to think of yourself as a choreographer, helping all ages communicate and connect. I don't believe in you, and I don't believe in sending people off to old people home and letting them wait to die. We need each other, and we've never needed each other more than we need each other now.
Vanessa said, yes, my dad is still working at 80. Think he brings that to his workplace.
Yeah, be heavenly. And people will love him for being there. Absolutely wonderful. Providing, I might say, two things. Someone who's 23 isn't arrogant, and someone who's 80 isn't, back when I did it, here, I'll tell you how you do it, son. It's genuinely teaching all ages how to collaborate.
What's next, Fabian? So obviously Antarctica might be off the list for the immediate future, but the ambition and the drive, the vision is still very much there. So how do we keep this going?
So Homeward Bound miraculously survived the fact that we couldn't go to Antarctica. We had 400 applications for 100 spots in the middle of the pandemic, and we've got the 6th cohort. So we've got 2 cohorts now running, and we will be opening up for Homeward Bound 7 early next year. So Homeward Bound now is reshaping its vision and going to the next level. I'm not at liberty to share with you what it is, but the need is greater and the conviction is clearer about the place women have. From my perspective, I also have a very big initiative that will likely launch next year. If I were to tell you, it's to help the world change its story about itself and to create a sense of future that we all want, not the future we fear. That will give you a taste of the scale. And it will be with a lot of collaborators, and it is building on the experience and expertise that I've learned with a lot of other people through the Homeward Bound experience. I would never have thought, just so you know, 6 years ago that I would learn how to organise a ship in Antarctica. The piece of cake, I know how to do that. So if anybody want to organise a ship to go to Antarctica, I'll tell you how to do it.
I think it's one of my favourite quotes. I had a mentor earlier in my life, and he said, the only day you know everything you need to know is on the last day because you've done it. And it's something that stuck with me for just about every single thing I've done in my life. And we've had a common theme through VID of, having the courage to ask and the courage to reach out and connect to people. And there's very little that is impossible when you start to do that. Like you said, if you can organize a boat to Antarctica, you can organize a flight around the world, you can find yourself in Africa, you can climb the biggest mountain in the world. There's very little that you can't do.
Or indeed cook your first souffle, plant a flower bed, or take the dog for a walk.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just going to put a little slide up if any of you do want to contact me. Our organisation, Em's going to show it, our organisation is, as long as I breathe, committing to enabling men and women to lead and be differently. We are helping men and women change the way they talk to each other and their definitions of leadership. We are building in courage in women to collaborate, but coming from a deep sense of self. We coach extensively, and we have a very, very big global network, and we will help people. So there are a range of ways that you can connect to us, and don't be shy of doing so. Thank you for having me this morning, Julia.